Depression, unemployment, and unimaginable crises. Korea War, one of the most horrifying era for South Korean people. After the war, Korea economy has collapsed. In the late 1960s, South Korea was a poor country with a GDP per person of only $500. But few years later, this country rapidly grew with high GDP. In 2020, South Korea reached out $30,000 GDP per capita. South Korea building the companies like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG. This is the story of Miracle Secret. This miracle didn't happen overnight. It took decades of hard work, planning, and determination by the government, businesses, and the people. Today's story is all about history of South Korea economy. South Korea's economy didn't grow by luck. The government and the people worked together to rebuild after the Korean War. From building factories to investing in education, the government played a huge role in this success. South Korea's transformation from a war-torn country into a global economic powerhouse is often called the miracle on the Han River. In the early 1960s, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. It relied heavily on agriculture, and much of the infrastructure was destroyed during the Korean War. The country's GDP per capita was just around $500. Many doubted that South Korea could ever become a developed nation. But South Korea's leaders had a vision. Under President Park Chung-hee, who came to power in 1961, the government started a series of 5-year economic development plans. These plans focused on industrializing the country, reducing its reliance on agriculture, and modernizing infrastructure. The first step was building a strong industrial base. The government invested in heavy industries like steel, chemicals, and shipbuilding. This laid the foundation for South Korea to export goods to the rest of the world. Over time, these industries became global leaders. At the same time, South Korea focused on education. The government knew that to compete in the global economy, it needed a highly educated workforce. Schools and universities were expanded, and soon South Koreans were becoming some of the most educated people in the world. Another factor in South Korea's economic success was its ability to adapt to changes in the global market. When other countries started to catch up in heavy industries, South Korea shifted its focus to high-tech sectors. Companies like Samsung and LG began producing electronics and semiconductors, which are now critical to the global economy. By the late 1990s, South Korea had fully transformed from a poor, agrarian society into a major industrial and technological power. The country's economy grew at an average annual rate of 9% between 1960 and 1990, one of the fastest growth rates in the world. Today, South Korea's GDP per capita is over $30,000. The miracle on the Han River is now studied by economists and leaders around the world as a model for how a developing nation can achieve rapid growth and development. The role of the state. The South Korean government played a central role in shaping the country's economic recovery and growth. After the devastation of the Korean War, the state took direct control over the economy, guiding it through a series of ambitious reforms and development plans. The state became both a planner and a key investor in South Korea's future. In 1961, after President Park Chung-hee came to power, the government launched its first 5-year economic development plan. These plans were designed to modernize the economy by focusing on industrialization and reducing the country's dependence on agriculture. The government recognized that to build a strong economy, it needed to create the right infrastructure and invest in people. One of the first areas the state focused on was infrastructure. South Korea needed roads, ports, and power plants to support its growing industries. The government invested heavily in these projects, making sure businesses had the transportation and energy they needed to grow. Beyond infrastructure, the South Korean state recognized that education was key to economic growth. The government massively expanded the education system, building new schools and universities. In the early years, the focus was on basic education for everyone, but soon the state prioritized technical and higher education to prepare people for jobs in engineering, technology, and management. By investing in education, the government helped create a highly skilled workforce. This workforce became the backbone of South Korea's economy, capable of driving innovation and productivity in industries like manufacturing, electronics, and shipbuilding. Education wasn't just about literacy. It was about preparing South Koreans for the global economy. Another key part of the government's role was supporting industries directly. In the early years, the state helped establish key sectors like steel, petrochemicals, and shipbuilding by providing financial support, low-interest loans, and subsidies. The government didn't just leave businesses to operate on their own. It actively guided them, helping them to grow and become internationally competitive. Small and medium-sized businesses also benefited from the state's policies, while big family-owned conglomerates, known as chaebols, led much of the growth. The government provided special programs to help smaller businesses thrive. This created a broader base for economic activity, ensuring that growth reached different parts of the economy. Through careful planning, direct investment, and strong leadership, the South Korean state guided the country from the brink of collapse to one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. While the role of the state in the economy has evolved over the years, its early interventions were critical in shaping South Korea's economic miracle. The role of chaebols. An important part of South Korea's economic success story is the role played by chaebols. These are large, family-owned business conglomerates that dominate South Korea's economy. Companies like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG started as small businesses but grew to become global giants, playing a critical role in the country's rapid industrialization. Chaebols began to rise in the 1960s during South Korea's push toward industrialization. The government saw them as key players in building the nation's economy. To support their growth, the state offered chaebols cheap loans, tax benefits, and other incentives. In return, these companies focused on developing strategic industries such as steel, shipbuilding, and electronics. The close relationship between the government and chaebols was essential in the early stages of South Korea's economic development. While the state provided the financial resources, the chaebols took the lead in turning those investments into successful businesses. Over time, many chaebols expanded from one industry into several, building vast networks of companies under one brand. Chaebols were not just focused on the domestic market. With government support, they became major exporters, helping South Korea earn foreign currency and build a strong export-driven economy. By the 1980s, South Korean goods like cars, electronics, and ships were being sold around the world. Samsung, for example, went from being a small trading company in the 1930s to becoming the world's largest producer of semiconductors and smartphones today. Challenges facing South Korea. While South Korea has achieved remarkable economic growth, it now faces several serious challenges that could slow down its progress. These challenges threaten the long-term stability of the country's economy and demand new solutions for the future. One of the biggest challenges is South Korea's aging population. As the country grew wealthier, people started living longer, but the birth rate dropped significantly. Today, South Korea has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, with fewer than one child per woman on average. This demographic shift means that the working-age population is shrinking, while the number of elderly people who need social support is growing. By 2050, it is expected that 1 out of every 3 South Koreans will be over 65 years old. This creates a burden on the country's pension and healthcare systems, and it puts pressure on younger workers to support the economy. A declining population also affects South Korea's labor force and productivity. With fewer young people entering the workforce, businesses may struggle to find enough workers to fill jobs, especially in industries that depend on manual labor and innovation. This could lead to a slower rate of economic growth in the future. Another challenge South Korea faces is intense global competition. The rise of neighboring economies like China and Vietnam means that South Korea no longer dominates the global market in industries such as manufacturing and electronics. Chinese companies, in particular, have become major competitors in areas like shipbuilding, semiconductors, and smartphones, industries that have been key to South Korea's success. To stay competitive, South Korea must continue to innovate and invest in new technologies. The government and businesses are focusing on areas like artificial intelligence, green energy, and biotechnology. However, innovation takes time, and South Korea needs to find ways to stay ahead while facing increasing global pressure. In addition to demographic and competitive pressures, South Korea also faces growing income inequality. While the country's economy has grown, the benefits of that growth have not been evenly distributed. Many young people, in particular, struggle with high housing prices, low wages, and limited job opportunities, leading to rising social discontent. To address these challenges, the South Korean government will need to implement economic reforms. Policies that encourage higher birth rates, improve social welfare for the elderly, and promote innovation and entrepreneurship could help the country manage future. Without changes, South Korea risks losing the momentum that has driven its economic miracle. Despite these challenges, South Korea's resilience, innovative spirit, and global leadership position mean that the country has the potential to overcome these hurdles. But the path forward will require smart policies and bold actions to ensure continued prosperity.